Okay, moving on with chapter 3, lesson 8, with part 3 of the study guide. Sorry, we're up to lesson 8 in WESH, globalization, connections, and disconnections. So, picking up, continuing with economy, we're doing the commodity cycle, commodity fetishism, redefining power. Remember Mahatma Gandhi and Satyagraha doing this soft power, trying to force people to act out of the goodness of their heart and not forcing them with the force of arms, which is hard power. Force of arms or economic um, forcing. Structural power. Yali's question: why? What was Yali's question? Hold on. Seven, 8. Why are some countries so rich and others so poor? And that's what we're trying to figure out here. Why did the rich countries become rich and stay rich, and why did the poor countries become poor and stay poor? So Jared Diamond in Guns, Germs, and Steel, he talks about the geographic proximity of Europe to China. He talks about the technology cycle of getting more and more powerful weapons. He talks about disease resistance that took place because Asia and Europe were all in um, the same ecozone, so diseases traveled across from China to Europe, giving people, killing people off during the Black Plague, but giving them a lot of natural antibodies against some of these diseases. But also, we want to talk about world systems theory, about the origin of the world system that we live in today. So, this is a materialist explanation following Karl Marx, who was following the money. He wasn't necessarily interested in what people thought. He was more interested in what they spent and where they spent it. So, development theories, we have three competing theories for why economies, we know that the world started out um, as a system where the European economies dominated the rest of the world. But why did that continue after 1945? Basically, after the fall of these great colonial empires, after all these countries start getting their independence, why is India still poor, even though the British haven't ruled it since 1947? And so there's three different reasons, three different arguments here. One is modernization theory, another is dependency theory, and then the third is world systems theory, which is where we're going to end up. So modernization theory, remember this was from the 1950s and 60s. It said capitalist was a naturally occurring event, not an invention. This is where we get the first, second, and third worlds. It's been rejected. Dependency theory was a leftist reaction to modernization theory. It focused on impoverishment and development, but it seemed like too much of a conspiracy theory. It was also rejected because it just wasn't realistic about why people do things the way they do things in capitalism. So the third one, world systems theory, is much more informed, and it focuses on the international division of labor. So there's three kinds of countries, the periphery, the semi-periphery, and the core, and there are three labor sectors, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So the periphery is dominated by extractive economies like fishing, mining, agriculture, etc. That's the primary labor sector. The semi-periphery economies are dominated by the secondary labor sector, which is semi-periphery economies. Periphery economies are like many African countries or Southeast Asian countries, poorer places, rural places. The semi-periphery is dominated by maybe Brazil or China. These are the secondary, dominated by the secondary labor sector, having to do with manufacturing. And then the core economies of Western Europe, the United States, Japan, are dominated by the tertiary labor sector, which is services. And that's where we are in this classroom. We're trying to enter the service sector and enter at a higher level. You can provide services at a skilled labor level, working the 10 key, or you can provide services at an RN or a certified public accountant or something like that, and that makes commands a higher income. And so those economies are dominated by those higher income tertiary sector jobs. And that's the best explanation as to why development doesn't work. So if you remember here, the Hunger Games, um, this is important. This is important here that you know about the labor sectors and you know about the three different kinds of countries, and you can remember that as the part that was talking about the Hunger Games. Okay. Inequality, it's the best explanation of why development doesn't work. Inequality, this differential between primary, secondary, and tertiary is a feature of capitalism, not a bug. There has to be losers if you're going to have winners in such a zero-sum game. Now, there's other ways to set things up. Of course, we could play it a different way, but we have chosen not to. We chose to play it this way, and so that's why it works like that. Gandhi's gambit was to try to break that apart by using the Great Salt March and just shame the British into relaxing their brutal rule. And it worked. It worked. 17 years later, India was free. Then we have the example of Rüschlikon, Switzerland, where Ivan Glossenberg has this company called Glencore. Those numbers are just still incredibly staggering. That let's see, Rüschlikon has 5,000 people, but because Ivan Glossenberg is a bazillionaire, his income taxes in Switzerland yield $72,000 for each resident, because they do have high income taxes, but they don't have high corporate taxes. So because they don't have high corporate taxes, that's where Glencore is headquartered, because they don't pay anything, and he only pays on his income. So Glencore owns the Zambian copper. That was the whole point, that the Zambian copper factory was run basically at a loss because it was helping the people of Zambia. It was a state-owned company. When Zambia ran out of money, then they were forced to privatize the company with the same conditions, even though they were no longer benefiting the people of Zambia. So due to this transfer pricing, then they can export they can transfer the copper, the Zambian copper, to Switzerland, and then export it, quote unquote, from Switzerland at this huge profit. But because Switzerland doesn't tax corporate profits, boom, they have made their investors a fortune. So this is just how it works. This is the way these legal fictions are created to keep the rich richer and the poor poorer. This is structural power. This is how the system works to benefit the people who are already in power. They wrote the laws like that precisely so they could continue to benefit. A lot of this has to do with the productivity, the way production is organized around the world, so that you can have a wool suit that's made in Canada, but it's involved in all other places of the world except Canada. Who demands such exploitation? Nobody demands it. It's a feature of the system. The iPod sold for $400, but only $4 of that money stays in China. Structural power and structural violence. This is the likelihood that we will be exposed to violence as a result of our position in society. Purchasing power parity. That means if you're making $100,000 in and trying to live in San Francisco on $100,000, and you get a transfer to Ohio, and they're only going to pay you 50. You should probably take it, because you'll be able to live for better in Ohio on 50,000 than you would in San Francisco on 100. We are the structure. It is what we make of it. Participation is not a choice. You're in it, and you make decisions every day to continue to play by those rules. If you want to change what you're doing, you gotta do it consciously. So how we choose to participate is our most important choice, our moment of power. We're coming to that. So obsolescence. This is the fact that the fact that things go bad. We buy these things and then they break and then we have to buy new ones. Planned obsolescence is to make things particularly weak so that they will break, and you'll have to buy, instead of just buying one for 5 years, you buy one every 2 years, and you'll end up buying more over a decade. Perceived obsolescence has to do with the fashion industry, this idea that you have to be on top of the curve, on top of the ahead of the curve, and making sure that you look stylish. And this, of course, drives clothing manufacturers. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911 killed a lot of people and eventually changed the laws. And we have similar deadly factory disasters in Bangladesh every year. This is in South Asia, next to India. Uh, is it going to produce the same kind of reaction of changing laws to make sure workers are protected? We live on trash. Just 1% of what we extract is in use 6 months later. Used clothing is a huge market. Haiti is a source for new clothes and a market for used clothes. So how much does it cost to be you? The history global system, where do we fit? We fit in the system beginning with John Locke and the political assumption of autonomous individuals. I will come back to this shortly.